Tonight on Reporting Scotland.
Refugees are welcome here.
As protests continue over plans to evict failed asylum seekers in Glasgow, the landlords reject claims it will trigger a humanitarian crisis. The future of House of Fraser has been thrown into doubt after its potential new owner pulls out of the deal. More than half the population of Scotland have now signed up to be organ donors, but hundreds of people continue to wait for a transplant.
Somebody's given a life to give me a life, basically. That's how it all is.
And coming up on the programme, we join police in Glasgow as they carry out raids to tackle what officers describe as benefits fraud on an industrial scale.
I don't know if you can see the changes that have come over me.
And we take a look at how Glasgow is marking the start of the biggest multi-sport event in Scotland since the Commonwealth Games. Good evening. The landlords Serco have rejected claims they will trigger a humanitarian crisis in Glasgow by evicting 300 people whose asylum applications have been rejected. The company has issued letters of eviction to 6 men this week, saying their locks will be changed if they don't leave their homes within 7 days. It comes as 2 other Afghan men whose asylum applications have failed go on hunger strike in Glasgow. Katie Hunter reports.
They've come to Home Office buildings in Glasgow to go on hunger strike. Mirwas and Rahman's asylum applications have failed and they now fear they'll be homeless. Rahman says he was born in a refugee camp in Pakistan. He was sent a general eviction notice by landlord Serco last month.
I feel so bad and so lonely because I don't have anybody here. All entire life I'm a refugee.
The men's supporters say they have nowhere to go.
Afghanistan is one of the most unsafe country, and these young boys, one of them is a young boy who came to this country, another one is born in a refugee camp, and now the Home Office is telling them that your country is quite safe and you can go and live in your country, which is not really good.
Refugees are welcome here.
Less than a mile away, protesters gathered outside Serco's office in Glasgow. The company houses asylum seekers on behalf of the UK government. Campaigners are angry Serco is planning to evict people whose asylum applications have been rejected by changing the locks on their homes. 6 notices are being issued this week.
A lot of the third sector organisations are now mobilising around this. They're putting other work kind of on the back burner. A lot of people are angry. A lot of people are scared as well from the community, but a lot of people are prepared to take action.
This evening, Serco responded to a letter from Glasgow City Council which claimed the company's policy could lead to a humanitarian crisis. Serco said that simply is not true. It says it will restrict the number of lock change notices to no more than 10 per week, adding that the local arrangements, once Home Office support had ceased, were inadequate. The Home Office said that while an asylum claim or appeal is outstanding, no one would be removed. But once the courts decide someone no longer has the right to be in the UK, they should leave the country. Mirwas and Rahman say that's not an option. The men insist they'll stay where they are until their cases are reviewed. Katie Hunter, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The future of House of Fraser has been thrown into fresh doubt after a Chinese investor pulled out of a proposed rescue deal. Sea Banner, which owns Hamleys, had been planning to buy a 51% stake in the chain, but says it's no longer interested. The future of the flagship store in Glasgow and of Jenner's in Edinburgh are now in doubt. Well, our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser joins me. So why has this Chinese company pulled out?
Well, it was already largely Chinese owned, and there was a transaction in China towards Sea Banner investing. It's already a clothing and maker and retailer in China. It was to inject £70 million of new capital. which is needed in order to get it past the next rent day, which is next month. The deal included the closure of 31 out of the 59 stores across Britain, 6,000 expected job losses involved with that. Of 4 Scottish stores, only one of them was due to close as part of that, and that's the Fraser store on Princess Street in Edinburgh. C Banner's now saying it can't go through with the deal. Partly there's the legal challenge to the deal from retail landlords. Also, its share price in Hong Kong has plummeted and it can't raise the money that it needs any longer. So the management at House of Fraser are now going out to try to find some other retail investors. Mike Ashley, controversial figure behind Sports Direct, he's one of those they'll be speaking to. He already owns a stake in the company. If they don't get the money, then the whole chain is going to be at risk in Scotland. That means 3 other stores, as you say. Fraser's, the big department in Glasgow, where it all began. Jenner's in Edinburgh, and it also has a branch at Loch Lomond Shores. The House of Fraser is not alone in the kind of problems that it's got at the moment. So are many other big-name retailers. And the pace of change has really picked up this year. A lot of thousands of jobs right across Britain have been lost because of closures with other chains.
Douglas, thank you very much for that update. More than half of people in Scotland who are eligible to be organ donors have signed up to the register. That's the highest rate in Britain. More than 2.7 million people are now registered here, and the Scottish Government wants to see even more. Katrina Renton reports from the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow.
Are the family coming through to see you?
At 3:45 on Friday morning, Khalid Mohammed woke with a start. He'd fallen asleep with his headphones on, but they'd fallen out.
And I thought, where's this ringing coming from? And I'm looking around, I thought something's been activated. And luckily I picked up my phone and I recognized the Glasgow number. And I answered it just in time, you know. And then if the transplant coordinator is saying that we've got a possibility of a kidney transplant, if we would like you to come through to Glasgow for between 8 and 9.
I bet you're glad you answered that phone call though.
Oh yes, no regrets.
Anna Brown previously had a transplant that did not work. Now she's on dialysis, waiting to get back on the list.
That's 3 times a week, and it's 4 hours.
A kidney transplant would transform her life.
We were planning on retiring and going on a lot more cruises and that, but never worked. It never happened because of my kidneys.
More than 50% of Scots have now signed up to the organ donation register, the highest rate in the UK, which averaged at 38% earlier this year. But there are still 550 people on the waiting list.
I think it's one of those things where you want to do it, you just never quite get around to it. So that's partly why we're also introducing the opt-out legislation into the Scottish Parliament, where the presumption will be that unless you have opted out of donating your organs and tissues, then you are willing to do that, although there will still be a caveat, an important caveat, which is about final discussion between the clinicians and the family.
Some are sceptical as to whether this legislation would be necessary. Wales did it more than 2 years ago and so far hasn't seen a significant change. Cadden O'Connor donated her kidney to her son Dean.
We see him getting back to his old self again, you know, his sense of humour coming out and just getting a bit fitter again.
Brilliant. A brilliant story. What do you say to your mum then?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
In the biggest operation of its kind ever mounted by Police Scotland, 16 people have been arrested in the Govanhill area of Glasgow. The raids were into alleged benefit fraud, which police say is on an industrial scale. Our Home Affairs correspondent Reba Alderson reports.
OK, colleagues, good morning. A very warm welcome to Cathcart Police Office this morning.
It's 6 a.m. and officers are being briefed about the biggest operation of its kind ever mounted by Police Scotland, codenamed Arnos.
Operation Arnos is a multi-agency investigation that has been ongoing for some time now.
The operation's been planned for almost a year and involves more than 100 police and officials from the Department of Work and Pensions, HMRC and Home Office Immigration Enforcement.
What we're dealing with today is an almost industrial scale benefit fraud and attack on the UK benefits system by an organised crime group. And our operation has two phases today. The first phase is targeting the organised crime group who have orchestrated the fraud, and the second phase is targeting those who have helped facilitate the fraud, so carried out the fraudulent transactions.
Police say the extent of the organised benefit fraud could be as much as £4.6 million. Detectives involved in the operation believed it centred on office premises in the Govanhill area of Glasgow. In the first phase of this operation, 10 premises, including this one in Govanhill, have been targeted. The second phase, which will continue for some time, involves the possible detention of up to 55 people in the Govanhill area. 16 people have been arrested, most for suspected benefit and mortgage fraud. One was detained after £200 worth of cannabis plants were discovered. Revel Alderson reporting Scotland, Govanhill.
Police searching for a missing woman in Dumfries say a body has been found. Lynn Tyson from Cumbernauld was last seen in the early hours of Sunday morning after leaving a nightclub. Extensive searches of the River Nith were carried out, including the use of police divers. This afternoon, a body was recovered from the water. It's still to be identified, although Miss Tyson's family are aware of the development. Detectives say it's lucky a major fire at the old Stobhill Hospital in Glasgow didn't spread to the working hospital nearby. At its height last night, more than 100 firefighters tackled the flames at the building. A joint police and fire service investigation is underway. 4 years ago, Glasgow was in the midst of hosting the Commonwealth Games. Well, now the city is preparing to stage another major spectacle. The European Championships will see 7 sports coming together to form a new event, mainly being held in the city. Well, tonight a concert at George Square will declare those championships open. Let's go there now and join Jane Lewis.
Well, Jackie, just look at this. There is such a party atmosphere down here, despite the odd rainfall. But yes, this concert to mark these inaugural European Championships well and truly underway. You know, there's going to be a real festival feel to these European Championships. More on that in a moment. But what about the sporting action then? Well, for the very first time, these 7 sports have decided to combine their very own European Championships that they usually hold individually to be held at the same time and in almost the same place. It means that Glasgow is once again gearing up for another multi-sport event.
Glasgow back in the sporting spotlight and ready for this inaugural multi-sport event. The city will host the swimming and the synchronised swimming. Track, road cycling and BMX will also take place in Glasgow, with mountain biking on the outskirts overlooking the city. Glasgow is also the place for gymnastics, but other events are elsewhere. Diving is in Edinburgh and open water swimming in Loch Lomond. Strathclyde Park in North Lanarkshire will host rowing and triathlon, while at Gleneagles there's a golf team event. 3,000 athletes from across Europe will compete at these championships, and in the British team there's Scottish interest, with 47 Scots involved. 10 Scots are in the swimming team.
Ross Murdoch is going to take the gold for Scotland.
With some heading back to the same pool where they made a name for themselves during Glasgow 2014.
There's a lot of bragging rights up for grab here, so you know, I had a bit of a couple down years following 2014, and you know, I'm still kind of coming back on the up from that. So you know, I'm just trying to make a little bit of progress from last year.
On the water, 7 Scots have made the rowing team and are relishing competing on home waters.
The last kind of home championships were the World Championships in 2013, and before that it was the Olympics in 2012. So to have the rowing back somewhere in the UK is just incredible.
The Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome will see 4 Scots competing.
Gold for Great Britain!
Including this Olympic champion.
My skin will feel hot. My palms will be as sweaty as they are now. And I'll convince myself it's joy, but I think it'll be a lot of nerves as well.
Berlin will host the athletics. 17 Scots are in the British team, and much is expected from the likes of Laura Muir.
Well, very much like the Commonwealth Games being held in Glasgow 4 years ago, the sports is just a kind of sideshow almost. That's because places like here in George Square and other areas across the city will be holding Festival 2018. Our reporter Aileen Clark has been finding out just what that might entail.
Central Station and a top tune among the trains. The Nevis Ensemble is Scotland's newest orchestra. Assembled for the European Championships, they've now had 4 days of rehearsals and they'll be popping up in church halls, country parks and care homes.
I think this is gig number 5 of 70 performances we're going to be doing.
And what do you think of your venue this morning?
It's terrific, and it's just great to see a really, really wide range of audience.
Oh, it's fabulous. They've got a bit of an unequal struggle against all the announcements, but they're doing fine.
It's tremendous. It's really good.
That's brilliant.
I don't know if you can see the changes that have come over me.
Rehearsals underway earlier for tonight's big opening party. George Square, the Merchant City and Glasgow Green are all hosting free events from opera to art, cooking to circus skills.
So a real showcase of what Glasgow's all about.
And that's the choir practising now for tonight.
That is, and it's really, really exciting because we're nearly there. Tonight's the opening night, and that's the choir that will be singing as part of that welcome to everybody here to Glasgow.
And there's a chance for everyone to get a little bit of the limelight because here in George Square, Sunday night is karaoke night. And hey, this is Glasgow. Everybody's got a song.
And through it all, she offers me protection, a lot of love and affection, whether I'm right or wrong.
I will survive.
Can you give me a few bars?
No, no. No, it's empty Glasgow.
Oh, what a feeling, doo-doo, dancing on the ceiling, down the waterfall, wherever it may take me. Know the life won't break me when I come to call. She won't forsake me.
Well done, sir.
Oh, I bet he is first in the line for that karaoke. Well, the magic time this evening is 8:15 because that's here at George Square where these inaugural European Championships will be declared open. The party very much started though underway, Jackie. Tomorrow the action gets underway. There's no medals up for grabs on day one, but there's plenty of important qualifiers in rowing, in track cycling and also in gymnastics too. Live from George Square, I'm away to join the party, Jackie. Back to you.
You do that, Jane. Thank you very much for that. Now, it's just after 7:15. A reminder of tonight's main story. 2 failed asylum seekers say they've gone on hunger strike in protest at plans to evict them from their accommodation in Glasgow. And still to come, a big increase in whisky tourism with almost 2 million visitors going to distilleries last year. Now, we've long been told that oily fish is good for us, but levels of omega-3 in farmed salmon are falling. Well, now researchers in the Highlands are giving salmon food made with GM crops in an attempt to increase their nutritional value. But critics say that GM technology is propping up an unsustainable system of industrial food production. Our science correspondent Parab Ghosh reports.
2 different types of salmon here. We've got the wild and then we've got the farmed here.
Chefs will tell you that salmon is one of the healthiest foods you can eat, but it's not as good for you as it once was. Tests have shown that levels of an oil called omega-3 have halved in farmed salmon in recent years. There's still enough to be beneficial, but levels are continuing to drop. To reverse the trend, these fish are being given a feed high in omega-3 oil produced by GM crops. The feed has worked in the lab, but the big question is whether it'll do just as well on a real fish farm, like this one in the Highlands. If it does, it'll be commercially produced and make salmon more nutritious in farms all across the world.
We've also trialled this with sea bass and sea bream, which are the 2 main species farmed elsewhere in Europe, but it can also be used in all farmed fish. And not only that, it can be expanded out into feeds for other animals like pigs and poultry, because not everyone likes eating fish, like my wife.
This is quite an efficient little production factory for making oil.
Researchers believe that these genetically modified plants are the solution. Their seeds contain omega-3 oil. Consumers in many parts of the world would be happy to eat the salmon fed on the oil that's crushed out of them. But there's consumer resistance in Europe.
I think the technology's got a great deal to offer. It's not necessarily a silver bullet, but I think we should use that along with all the other approaches that we could adopt. Especially now that we're going to be leaving the EU, maybe there's an opportunity for us to consider how we regulate GM.
We're going to cook them in the same pan, and then we're going to taste, because they taste completely different.
Aldo Zilli is one of the country's foremost chefs, so he knows a thing or two about fish.
The scientists are saying that it's healthier, it's got more omega-3 in.
Do we believe that?
Oh, I believe it. But
I personally don't agree with it, but if they think that there's going to be more omega-3, is it omega-3? Is it natural? Is it good for us? Do we know? You know, all those things are worrying when you start messing around with force-feeding animals.
Aldo isn't alone in having his doubts. He's sticking to wild salmon while I try the farmed.
It's a stronger flavour.
It's a completely different fish.
But this isn't bad.
That's not bad, but this is a different fish.
Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
And from food to drink, the value of whisky tourism rose last year, with almost 2 million people visiting distilleries. They're attracting tourists from across the globe who are keen to find out about our most famous product. Andrew Thompson can tell us more.
Distilleries like this one at Dalwhinnie in the Highlands are a major draw for tourists. You can get a behind-the-scenes look at the whisky making process with all of its peculiar sights and smells. And tours like this are becoming ever more popular.
Up until maybe about 5 years ago, we were looking at between kind of 25,000-30,000, but in the last few years our visitor numbers now have gone up to between 50 and 55, so it's nearly doubled, which has been amazing. But it's nice to see such a variety of people coming.
The highest number of visitors come from Germany and the USA, followed by India, China and Japan. But what is it that makes whisky distilleries so appealing?
In Denmark we only have the schnapps. Whisky is a little more delicate and more distinguished. So, and I thought it'd be interesting to come and see it again.
I know nothing about whiskey, so I want to come to here and find something maybe.
It could be something that people think of, yeah, it's just a drink, but it's much more than that. It's the whole process. It's kind of a legendary drink, right?
So this is a real boom time for Scotland's whisky industry. Last year there was an 11% rise in the number of people coming to distillery visitor centres, and those 1.9 million people spent a grand total of £61 million. Now, whisky exports are currently valued at £4.37 billion, and whisky producers think that by showing people how whisky is made, it could help to boost those figures even further.
I think a lot of the people who are, who come to distilleries, will be Scotch consumers in some shape or form. I think they might leave Scotland, with more favourite brands, with a better understanding of Scotch, a broader understanding of it. So I think it really assists our market.
Major investments being made in many distillery visitor centres across the country, and the benefits of the Water of Life look set to flow into the tourism sector for many years to come. Andrew Thompson, reporting Scotland, Dalwhinnie.
Football now, and Celtic are in Norway this evening, aiming to secure a safe passage to the next round of the Champions League qualifiers. They lead 3-1 from the first leg in Glasgow. Alistair Lamont reports.
The city of Trondheim is familiar territory for Celtic. They visited on Champions League business last season, 364 days ago to be precise, and emerged victorious. There's a familiarity too about the Celtic squad. Of the team that won here, Stuart Armstrong and Eric Sviatchenko have departed. Celtic's summer additions, Odsonne Edouard and Scott Bain, were already on loan at the club, but the manager doesn't see that as a problem.
Nowadays it's always about wanting to get new players in and lots of players, but I also enjoy the continuity of coaching and seeing players improve, and seeing their games continually develop. But of course, we want to strengthen the squad, of course.
There's still a month for Celtic to do that. Brendan Rodgers has stressed that this transfer window is not about bolstering the squad for the sake of it. Rather, he wants one or two players who can make his first team better.
Well, if you're going to pay big money and he's going to bring a real quality player in, I think it'll be across midfield. You know, that player who can pass the ball, that can control the game alongside Brown, really, really top class. That's the top end. I think he also maybe has to bring an experienced one into the back.
Celtic should have enough to repeat last season's success against Rosenborg here tonight. But beyond that, there's a tough-looking tie against AEK Athens. And even at that, they'd have yet another round to negotiate to get back into the Champions League group stage. It's in those matches that Brendan Rodgers might be grateful of one or two high-quality additions to his squad. Alistair Lamont reporting Scotland, Trondheim in Norway.
Well, it's looking pretty good in Norway. Let's find out what the weather has in store here. No,
Jackie,
not good.
Misty, murky, cloudy and wet, I'm afraid. Hello, good evening. Well, it was a bright start for some of us, but cloudy conditions started to rain, especially further towards the west. Further towards the east, the northeast especially, we held on to some brightness. But for all of us this evening, it's going to be cloudy, it's damp, misty and murky and fairly mild as well. And the reason why, well, we have this weather system coming in from the Atlantic, a warm front, and then a cold front to follow. And in between, it's an area called the warm sector. And when we hear that word, well, then it's mainly cloudy, mild conditions, misty and murky, up over the hills for the coast as well. And it remains rather humid as well. So for this evening, that's the story. Fairly cloudy, outbreaks of rain spreading in. Some light rain and drizzle in places, but some moderate bursts too across parts of the southwest, later across parts of Aberdeenshire, and temperatures dipping no lower than around 13 to 15 Celsius, so fairly humid conditions overnight. And it remains that way for the morning, cloudy and damp too. But it's an improving story further towards the east, more of an east-west split during the course of the day. So if you're heading out around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's remaining rather cloudy further towards the west. There may be a little bit of brightness perhaps for Dumfries and Galloway, but still some mist and murk, low cloud around coastal areas. Temperatures 19, 20 Celsius here. But further towards the east, because of that southwesterly wind, we'll see more in the way of breaks in the cloud. And for parts of Aberdeenshire, for Murray, temperatures here could climb up to 25 Celsius in some of the sunshine, but remaining fairly cloudy across the Northern Isles too. And into the evening, it remains cloudy in the west. We'll see some further outbreaks of rain for a time, but it is drier further towards the east. Well, looking ahead, well, for Friday, well, it's an improving day. We'll have largely dry conditions for more southern areas, an increasing amount of sunshine later in the afternoon, but it will be a bit fresher. Temperatures around 19 to 22 Celsius, and the winds will be lighter as well, although it does remain fairly cloudy further towards the north, and there may be 1 or 2 showers, and some of these showers could be sharp at times. Now that's your forecast for now.
Thank you, Koza. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. Violence has erupted in Zimbabwe's capital city, Harare. The ruling ZANU-PF party won the parliamentary vote following Monday's general election. And the landlords Serco have rejected claims they will trigger a humanitarian crisis in Glasgow by evicting 300 people whose asylum applications have been rejected. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the late bulletin at 10:30. Join me for that if you can. Until then, from everyone in the team, have a good evening. Bye-bye.